Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 84, Fan Fiction, by Azazyel. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. Hestia, although she fainted somewhat, was still conscious enough to remember how her overdramatic fainting spell resulted in her being pushed into my face as I kept her from cracking her head open on the tile floor of the living room. So she quickly made herself scarce as she blushed heavily while I left her to be so I could focus on Terrarian. That's an impressive spell, but in reality, we shouldn't really use it unless we are fighting something we cannot defeat at all, I said as Seshet explained how Terrarian's spell would cut down the Excelia we would get after using it for a good while to allow the fauna to heal from being forcefully boosted to the next level without the needed high-quality Excelia needed to make up the framework of the foundation of a person's next level. So I took out an elemental staff and passed it to her. Just focus on walking the supporting mage path in the back while I fight up closer and Belle takes care of the mid-range stuff, I said, patting Terrarian between her golden ears. But everyone wants to use my spell. Terrarian almost whispered, but I rolled my eyes as I lifted Terrarian's chin so she wouldn't just stare at the ground. Terrarian, I said slowly as I smiled wryly. I mass-produce high-quality Excelia with my summoned bosses. The last thing I want is for my fauna to need to recover and slow down my growth. Our familias will only need your level-boosting spell at the most grave of moments, like fighting higher-level adventures, as we are very good at defending ourselves in a dungeon. I said, grinning as I thought that we more like bullied the dungeon with the impossible-to-bypass bunkers we would build in the dungeon. Though that cheat won't amount to much when the later monsters, like in the water city floors, can summon and manipulate the endless amount of water on the floor, and using that water they could fill up our bunkers and drown us. That would be a terrible way to go. So don't worry, Terrarian. We will not rely on you for your cheating spell. Instead, we will rely on you as a fellow compatriot within the dungeon that fights beside us. I said strongly, and she nervously giggled, looking shy, as for so long her level-boosting spell was all she was seen as. Then Terrarian cutely stared into my eyes as she tried to find some courage, and she asked with some steel in her spine. So I will be able to make my own fate. I patted her head again before I let go of her as I spoke. Sure, why not? But you are behind us, so you will need to work hard. I said, grinning, and Terrarian bravely nodded her head like she was trying to psyche herself up, to begin with. Before I could continue to seduce my new pet, I heard Belle coming downstairs, and I saw her wearing a fluffy robe with her long white hair flowing over her back as she wasn't wearing any kind of ponytail or bindings in order to let her hair breathe. Oh, Jake, you are back already. Belle said excitedly and then blinked at seeing Terrarian grasp a corner of my shirt. Sue. Who is she? Belle asked, tilting her head to the side slightly, and I chuckled as I pulled Terrarian in front of me. This adorable cinnamon roll is Senjuno Terrarian, the new member of my Seshet familia, I said proudly as Belle pouted and looked over at Hestia. Hestia. Why haven't we gotten any new members? Jake's familia has 4 members now, and it's even younger than our familia is. Belle whined and Hestia choked as she looked at Belle with a look of shock at her precious child's verbal betrayal and whining. Belle Crannel. She shouted, putting on a brave face as she tried to scold Belle for not being me and literally picking up people for her to put a fauna on them. Oh, so I just need to bring people for you to put a new fauna on? Belle asked, blinking in surprise and smiling as she clasped her hand in delight, as she came to some kind of realization. Well, then I've got someone already. I found a supporter who helped me do some solo dungeon work, and she is a nice prom. Belle said, and my eye twitched as I put together that she somehow came across Liliarku Ard-E, and actually, if my timeline is right, this was typically about the same time she was supposed to meet the troublesome midget. Meh, honestly, I didn't care about Lily as she wasn't going to be in my familia, and if she caused Belle any trouble, she would learn real quick not to do so when I find her. Yeah anyway, I sighed, cutting off Belle's way too innocent thoughts and mumbled words on how she could go about corrupting her midget supporter into her familia as Hestia stared at her child in horror and was whispering something about NTR, but I firmly ignored her as those thoughts led to madness. I decided to just rip the band-aid off and get it out in the open. Belle. This is hard to say, but your mother and aunt have been brought back to life, and they want to meet you. I said with a straight face, and Belle's face turned flat, and if anything hurt as she looked at me for a second, and took a deep breath. Jake, I don't even know who and what my mother looks like, let alone my aunt. She said firmly, and I nodded as that was fair to say, but I shrugged. Belle, listen to me and Hestia herself. Your mother and aunt have come back to life, and I am sure they are the same, as you look a lot like your aunt with the same white hair and a similar facial structure. I said, looking to Hestia, and she nodded. He is telling the truth, Belle, Hestia said softly, and Belle's face twisted before she took a deep breath. So you want me to meet them or something? She said softly and looking lost, and I kinda knew what she was going through as my home situation in my past life was messed up as well. I nodded as I pulled Belle into my arms before I sighed. Belle, your mother Materia is fine and not much of an issue for you to meet as she literally died giving birth to you. But your aunt, Althea, the Silence has a lot of baggage as she did some crazy shit before she originally died as she lost everything when Hera and Zeus Familia perished fighting the one-eyed black dragon. I explained, and Belle went silent as she rested in my arms. Finally, though, as Beatrice pulled Heraheim aside to show her around the house and the enclosed property, Belle finally spoke when Hestia subtly snuggled up against Belle as well. I don't mind meeting them, I guess. She muttered weakly, and I patted her on her back as I took a breath. Well, either way, I wanted to ask you if you want to come with me to Beer Mountains. I need to go mining for some special resources that I cannot get in the dungeon. I finished, and Belle grinned, looking over at Hestia. All right. Let's go on a vacation, as there is supposed to be a massive hot spring due to the volcanoes in the Beer Mountains. Belle said excitedly, and I nodded while Hestia chuckled and said she would also invite some of her other divine friends, like Mayak and Takamikazuchi. With that in stone, I then realized I would need to tell Althea that we were going on a vacation and that no, we weren't fleeing Ororio in order to not deal with her. Oh God, Althea is going to break my legs. I mentally groaned as I wondered if I could use Belle as a shield for the inevitable sound wave that was going to yeet me across Genkai.